When Navy divers finally pried open the hidden safe aboard submarine U-505, they expected codebooks and navigation charts. What they found instead would change the course of World War II and remain classified for 3 decades. But here is what most people do not know. The Enigma machine everyone celebrates was just the beginning. The real secret was not what the Allies found in that safe. It was what they did with it and who they had to sacrifice to keep it hidden. June 4th, 1944. The Atlantic Ocean is a graveyard of steel and souls. German U-boats have been terrorizing Allied shipping lanes for years, sending thousands of sailors to watery graves. But on this particular Sunday morning, off the coast of West Africa, the hunter is about to become the hunted. Commander Daniel Gallery stands on the bridge of the USS Guadalcanal, scanning the horizon. He has been chasing U-boats for months, but today he has a wild idea that goes against every rule in the Navy playbook. He does not just want to sink a German submarine, he wants to capture one. You have to understand how insane this is. Nobody captures submarines. They sink them. They blow them to pieces. Submarines are too dangerous, too unpredictable. One wrong move and everyone dies. But Gallery is not like other commanders. He has been planning this for months, drilling his crew on a scenario most of them think will never happen. Then sonar picks up something, a contact. U-505, a Type 9C submarine under the command of Oberleutnant Harold Lange, is running just below the surface. The German crew has no idea they are about to make history. Gallery gives the order. Depth charges rain down. The ocean erupts in massive plumes of water. Inside U-505, chaos. Lights flicker. Men are thrown against bulkheads. The submarine shudders like it is being torn apart. Lang makes a fatal decision. He orders an emergency surface, thinking his boat is finished anyway. U-505 breaks through the waves, and that is when Gallery springs his trap. Fighters strafe the conning tower to keep the Germans from manning their deck gun. The crew of U-505, convinced they are about to die, does exactly what they have been trained to do. They open the seacocks to scuttle the boat, and they abandon ship. But Gallery's boarding party is already in the water. Lieutenant Albert David leads 8 men toward the submarine in a small boat. They do not know if the U-boat is rigged to explode. They do not know if the scuttling charges are about to blow. They do not even know if there are German sailors still inside, waiting with weapons. David climbs the conning tower first. Water is pouring into the submarine through the open hatches. The interior is dark, lit only by emergency lighting. The smell hits him immediately. Diesel fuel, battery acid, and the unmistakable scent of fear. Every instinct tells him to turn back, but he does not. The boarding party descends into U-505, moving through the cramped corridors. They are racing against time. Water is flooding in. The submarine is sinking. They have maybe 15 minutes before she goes down. They split up, grabbing anything that looks important. Charts, documents, codebooks. Their hands shake as they work, knowing the ocean could swallow them whole at any second. One of the sailors, a machinist's mate, manages to close the seacocks. The flooding slows, then stops. Against all odds, they have done it. U-505 is theirs, but they do not celebrate yet, because they still do not know what they have really captured. The first discovery. The USS Guadalcanal takes U-505 under tow. Gallery orders radio silence. Complete radio silence. Nobody can know what just happened. As far as the world is concerned, U-505 was sunk with all hands. The German crew, now prisoners, are kept isolated. They can't talk to each other. They can't send letters home. They essentially disappear. Gallery knows he is sitting on something big, but he does not know how big. Not yet. The Navy sends intelligence officers to examine the submarine. They go through everything, every locker, every drawer, every hidden space. What they find is extraordinary. Codebooks. Current codebooks. The Germans did not have time to destroy them. This alone is worth its weight in gold. But there is something else. Something the intelligence officers almost miss. One of them, a crypt analyst named Howard Engstrom, is examining the radio room when he notices something odd. The walls do not match up. There is a discrepancy, a space that should not be there. He measures it 3 times. There is definitely a hidden compartment. But where is the entrance? He runs his hands along the metal panels, looking for seams, for hinges, for anything. Nothing. The German engineers who designed this were clever, too clever. Engstrom brings in more people. They examine every inch of that section. It takes them 2 days, 2 full days of searching. And then a young ensign who has been studying German engineering manuals has an idea. He checks the electrical panel. There is a circuit breaker that does not seem to connect to anything. He flips it. A panel slides open, just like that. Hidden in plain sight. Behind it is a safe. Not a standard Navy safe. This is something else. Heavy-duty construction, combination lock, and it is sealed tighter than anything they have ever seen. The Germans clearly wanted whatever was inside to stay inside. The safe is removed from the submarine and taken to a secure facility. Nobody opens it. Not yet. They bring in experts, safecrackers, engineers. The Navy wants to know what's inside, but they also do not want to risk destroying whatever it contains. This is not like cracking a bank vault. One wrong move and documents could be incinerated by internal charges. They X-ray it. The images show something inside, but they cannot make out details. Just shapes, rectangles that could be books or boxes, and something cylindrical. The anticipation is killing them. Days turn into weeks. The experts argue about the best approach. Some want to drill. Others say no, too risky. They need to crack the combination. A safecracker from Chicago, brought in under conditions of absolute secrecy, spends 16 hours with his ear pressed against the metal, listening for tumblers. His fingers work the dial with the precision of a surgeon. Click, click. Nothing. He starts again. The room is silent except for his breathing and the soft sound of the dial turning. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, he hears it. The final tumbler falls into place. He looks at the Navy officers in the room. Everyone holds their breath. He turns the handle. The safe door swings open. The first thing they see is documents. Lots of them. Documents stacked in neat bundles, wrapped in waterproof oilcloth. The Germans were meticulous. Every bundle is labeled, dated, organized. But the labels are in code. Not just German. Whatever these documents contain, the Germans wanted them protected, even if the safe was compromised. Engstrom carefully removes the first bundle. He unwraps it slowly, treating it like an ancient artifact. Inside are technical specifications and diagrams. But for what? He studies them, his background in mathematics and engineering kicking in. These are not just random schematics. They are modification instructions, upgrades to the Enigma machine. The Enigma was not just one machine, it evolved. The Germans constantly updated it, changing the wiring, adding rotors, modifying the reflector. Every change made the code harder to break. And these documents detailed modifications that Allied intelligence had never seen before. Modifications that might have already been implemented on other U-boats. But that is not all. Beneath the technical documents, they find something else. A wooden box about the size of a typewriter. Engstrom lifts it out carefully. It is heavier than expected. He sets it on the table and opens the lid. Inside is an Enigma machine, but not just any Enigma machine. This one is different. It has 4 rotors instead of 3. The standard naval Enigma had 3. Four rotors exponentially increased the number of possible combinations. Allied codebreakers at Bletchley Park had been struggling with four-rotor Enigmas, but they had never had one to examine up close. The implications are staggering. With this machine and the code books they had already recovered, the Allies could potentially read every message sent by German U-boats in the Atlantic. Every order, every position report, every tactical plan. But there is a catch, a big catch. If the Germans find out the Allies have this capability, they will change everything. New codes, new procedures, maybe even new machines. Everything the Allies have gained will evaporate overnight, which means the capture of U-505 has to remain secret. Not just classified, secret, as in it never happened. This is where things get dark. Gallery's crew is sworn to absolute secrecy. The German prisoners are kept in isolation for the rest of the war. Their families are told they are dead. Think about that. These men are alive, but as far as their loved ones know, they drowned in the Atlantic in June of 1944. And the U-505's? It cannot be destroyed. It is too valuable for intelligence purposes. But it cannot be seen, so it was hidden. It was taken to Bermuda first, then moved to a secret location where Navy intelligence could study every inch of it. The submarine became a ghost, present but invisible. Meanwhile, the Enigma machine and the documents are rushed to Bletchley Park. The British and American codebreakers there have been making progress against German naval codes. But this is the breakthrough they have been praying for. With the four-rotor machine and the current settings, they can accelerate their work exponentially. But here is what nobody talks about. Here is the part that got buried in classified files for 30 years. The intelligence from U-505 did not just help the Allies read German messages. It told them exactly when and where to strike, which convoys to protect, which U-boats to hunt, and sometimes which sacrifices had to be made. Breaking into the safe. Let me take you back to the moment when the safe first opened, because there is more to this story. Inside, beneath the Enigma machine, the intelligence officers found something that made their blood run cold. A diary, not an official log. A personal diary kept by U-505's previous captain, Peter Scheck. Scheck had commanded U-505 before Lange. He had committed suicide aboard the submarine in October of 1943, shooting himself in the head in front of his crew during a depth charge attack. The official story was that the stress of command had broken him. But this diary told a different story. Scheck had figured something out, something that terrified him. His entries from September 1943 onwards showed a man coming to a horrifying realization. Allied ships were anticipating U-boat movements, not sometimes, but consistently. Scheck had started to suspect that German naval codes were compromised. He had reported his suspicions up the chain of command. His superiors had dismissed him, told him he was paranoid. The Enigma was unbreakable. That is what everyone believed. Mathematically, statistically impossible to crack. But Scheck kept documenting incidents, times when Allied destroyers appeared exactly where they should not be, times when convoys changed course at the last possible moment, times when the coincidences were too coincidental. The diary's final entries are disturbing. Scheck knew he was right, but he could not prove it. And he could not live with sending his men into what he had come to see as an orchestrated trap. His last words, written hours before his death, read, "We are blind men walking into a room full of knives. God forgive me for what I could not prevent." The Allied intelligence officers reading this realized something crucial. The Germans had suspected their codes were broken. They had had a man who nearly figured it out, but he died before he could convince anyone. His suicide had actually helped the Allied cause by discrediting his concerns. Nobody takes the theories of a man who shot himself seriously. But there was more in that safe. Maps, not ordinary navigational charts. These were intelligence maps showing suspected Allied convoy routes, marked with dates and positions, and they were accurate. Disturbingly accurate. which meant German intelligence was also doing its job. The U-boats were not operating blind. They had good information too. This created a complex picture. Both sides were reading each other's mail to some degree, but the Allies had a crucial advantage. They knew they were reading German codes. The Germans only suspected it. Suspicion you can dismiss. Knowledge changes everything. Among the documents was also a list. Names and positions of German intelligence officers in neutral countries, assets, agents, people who fed information back to Berlin. This list alone was worth the entire operation. It allowed Allied counterintelligence to feed disinformation through channels the Germans trusted, to poison the well, so to speak. But the most valuable item in that safe, the thing that truly changed the war, was not the Enigma machine, or the codebooks, or even Scheck's diary. It was a small notebook, red leather binding, about 50 pages. It contained handwritten notes on Enigma operating procedures, the human element. You see, the Enigma machine was theoretically unbreakable, but humans are predictable. They make mistakes, and they take shortcuts. This notebook detailed every shortcut, every lazy habit, every common mistake that German radio operators made. It listed examples, using the names of girlfriends for message keys, starting messages with standard phrases, and repeating rotor settings because they were easy to remember. These human weaknesses were the actual cracks in the Enigma system. The machine was perfect, the people were not. This notebook became a roadmap to exploiting those imperfections. An instructor at the German Naval Communications School had written it as a guide for what not to do. Instead, it became a guide for Allied codebreakers on what to look for. Let's talk about what made this particular Enigma machine so special. The standard story is that the Allies captured an Enigma machine and broke German codes. That is an oversimplification. The Allies had already captured Enigma machines before U-505. The British had grabbed one from U-110 in 1941. The Poles had been working on Enigma since the 1930s. The problem was not having a machine. The problem was that the Germans kept changing how they used it. New rotor settings, new codebook procedures, new network protocols. Every captured machine and codebook was only good until the Germans implemented their next update. It was like running up a down escalator. The 4-rotor Enigma from U-505 was different because it came with something the others had not: the complete implementation package. Not just the machine, but the exact settings being used in June of 1944. The current codebooks, the current rotor configurations, the current message formats. Everything needed to read German naval traffic right now, not last month or last year. Inside the machine itself, hidden beneath the rotors, intelligence officers found something unexpected. Handwritten notes. A German cryptographer had written configuration notes in pencil on the inside of the casing. Notes that were not supposed to be there. Notes that revealed how the Germans themselves thought about their own security. The notes included troubleshooting guides that advised if transmission fails, try these settings. For Allied codebreakers, that was huge. It offered clear insight into fallback procedures. If they intercepted a garbled message, they now had a short list of alternate settings to try. It cut decryption time from weeks to days, sometimes hours. The machine also showed evidence of field modifications. German submariners had made unauthorized changes to make the Enigma faster to use in combat conditions. They had filed down certain components. They had added homemade quick-release mechanisms. Every modification was a deviation from the theoretical security model. Every deviation was a potential weakness. British cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park spent weeks studying these modifications after they received the U-505 Enigma. They built profiles of how different U-boat crews adapted their machines. Some crews were meticulous and followed every procedure exactly. Those messages were hardest to crack. Other crews got sloppy and took shortcuts. Those messages practically fell open. The intelligence from U-505 allowed the Allies to prioritize. They could focus limited code-breaking resources on messages from sloppy operators, decode those quickly for tactical advantage, and then use the insights gained to work on the harder traffic. It was a force multiplier. The real breakthrough came from cross-referencing the U-505 materials with intercepts from other U-boats. Patterns emerged. German naval communications operated in a predictable rhythm. Messages sent at certain times of day tended to use similar formats. Weather reports always started the same way. Position reports followed templates. With the codebooks from U-505, crypt analysts could anticipate what messages would say before they fully decrypted them. If they knew a transmission was a weather report, they could guess half the content. That dramatically reduced the number of possible solutions. What might take days could now take hours. And here's the really clever part. The Allies did not just use this intelligence defensively, they used it offensively. They would decrypt a message revealing U-boat positions, then route convoys around those positions. But not too obviously. Sometimes they sent convoys toward U-boats, then at the last minute they would receive a warning from a reconnaissance aircraft and change course. This maintained the illusion that Allied intelligence was good but not perfect, that they were not reading German codes, just getting lucky with air patrols. The Germans bought it. Even when they suspected code compromise, the pattern of Allied responses seemed to confirm it was just effective reconnaissance, not cryptanalysis. Turning the tide of war. The intelligence from U-505 reached Allied commanders in early July of 1944. This was 1 month after D-Day. The invasion of Normandy was succeeding, but it was fragile. Everything depended on keeping supply lines open across the Atlantic. U-boats were still sinking ships. They were still threatening the entire operation. Admiral Ernest King, the U.S. Chief of Naval Operations, received a briefing on what U-505 had yielded. His reaction was immediate. He ordered a dramatic escalation of anti-submarine operations, but not random operations. These were targeted strikes based on decrypted U-boat position reports. Between July and December of 1944, the Allies sank 63 German U-boats. That might not sound like a lot, but it was devastating. These were not random kills. These were surgical strikes against boats that were actually threatening convoys. The Germans could not understand how the Allies were finding them. Their boats were scattered across the Atlantic. Their communications were encrypted. Yet Allied hunter-killer groups kept appearing exactly where they were. Some German commanders started to refuse orders. They would receive instructions to patrol a certain area, and they would delay. They would claim mechanical problems. Anything to avoid going where high command told them to go, because going there seemed to mean certain death. This hesitation, this fear, was as valuable as the actual sinkings. Morale among U-boat crews collapsed. The survival rate for U-boat sailors in 1944 was worse than almost any other military assignment in World War II. About 75% of U-boat crews died. Think about that. 3 out of 4 men who went down in those submarines never came back up, and it was getting worse. But here is where the story gets morally complicated. The Allies knew things they could not act on. They would decrypt messages revealing U-boat positions, but sometimes they could not attack without revealing how they knew. If a U-boat reported its position in an encrypted message, and 6 hours later an Allied task force appeared out of nowhere, the Germans would know. So sometimes the Allies had to let U-boats go, even when they knew exactly where they were. Even when those U-boats might sink Allied ships, they had to preserve the secret of how they were getting their intelligence. The long-term advantage of reading German codes was worth more than the short-term gain of sinking one U-boat. This led to terrible decisions. In some cases, the Allies knew a U-boat was going to attack a specific convoy, but they could not divert the convoy too obviously. Instead, they increased air patrols in the area, hoping to spot the U-boat naturally. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it did not. People died so that secrets could be kept. There is a documented case from September of 1944 where Allied intelligence decrypted a message revealing that U-482 was moving into position to attack convoy H-305. They could not directly act on it, so they sent long-range aircraft on routine patrol. The aircraft did not find U-482. The U-boat attacked. 3 ships were sunk. 27 sailors died. Could those deaths have been prevented? Yes. Should they have been prevented? That is the question that haunted Allied commanders. By maintaining the Enigma secret, they were saving hundreds, maybe thousands of lives in the long run. But they were also making conscious choices that cost lives in the short term. After the war, when this became known, there was controversy. Some called it necessary sacrifice. Others called it murder by negligence. The truth is probably somewhere in between. War forces, impossible choices. The intelligence from U-505 gave the Allies an advantage, but that advantage came with a moral price. The impact on the German war effort was catastrophic. By late 1944, Admiral Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, was essentially operating blind. He'd send boats out and they'd disappear. He'd plan coordinated attacks on convoys, and the convoys would inexplicably change course. He suspected treachery. He suspected spies. He suspected everything except the truth. The Germans did investigate their codes, multiple times. Every investigation concluded the Enigma was secure, mathematically unbreakable. They never imagined the Allies had captured a 4-rotor machine with current codebooks. They never knew about U-505. What they never told us. The war ended in May of 1945. Germany surrendered. The U-boats that were still at sea were ordered to surface and surrender. The Battle of the Atlantic was over. The Allies had won, and the secret of U-505 remained locked away. The captured German sailors were released. They went home to Germany, to families who thought they'd been dead for a year. Imagine that reunion. Imagine explaining where you'd been, but they'd been sworn to secrecy. They couldn't talk about how they'd been captured. They couldn't explain the conditions of their imprisonment. They just had to come back and pretend everything was normal. Harold Lang, the captain of U-505, struggled with guilt for the rest of his life. He believed he'd failed his crew by surrendering the boat intact. He didn't know about the hidden safe. He didn't know about the Enigma machine. He just knew his submarine had been captured, and he blamed himself. He died in 1977, never knowing the full impact of what happened that day in June of 1944. The U-505 itself was brought to the United States after the war. It was studied extensively by Navy intelligence. Every weld, every modification, every design choice was documented. The submarine became a floating laboratory for understanding German engineering. But publicly, the Navy said very little about it. In 1954, the U-505 was donated to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. It took an incredible effort to get it there. They had to transport the submarine through the Great Lakes, then drag it on land using railroad tracks specially laid for the purpose. Thousands of people watched as this enormous steel cylinder was hauled through Chicago streets to its final resting place. The museum exhibit told a sanitized story. Brave American sailors captured a German submarine. Heroic boarding action. Technical marvel of engineering. All true, but incomplete. They did not mention the safe. They did not mention the Enigma machine. They did not mention that this particular submarine had changed the course of the war. That information stayed classified until 1975, 31 years after the capture. When the story finally came out, it emerged in pieces. First, British government documents revealed the extent of Enigma decryption at Bletchley Park. Then American archives started to open. Slowly, the full picture came together. But even then, some details remained classified. The extent to which the Allies had sacrificed ships and sailors to protect the Enigma secret was not publicly acknowledged until the late 1980s. The existence of Schech's diary and what it contained was not revealed until the 1990s. Some documents are probably still classified. Why the secrecy long after the war ended? Several reasons. First, cryptographic methods used against the Enigma remained relevant to Cold War intelligence. The Soviets and other nations used similar encryption machines. Revealing how the Allies had broken Enigma might compromise current operations. Second, political sensitivity. The revelation that Allied commanders had knowingly allowed ships to be sunk to protect intelligence sources was explosive. It raised questions about the ethics of wartime decision-making that governments did not want to address. Third, and perhaps most important, protecting sources and methods. Intelligence agencies never want to reveal exactly how they get their information. Even historical revelations can compromise current operations by revealing patterns of thinking, analytical methods, or operational priorities. The men who captured U-505 were eventually honored. Daniel Gallery was promoted to admiral. Albert David received the Medal of Honor for leading the boarding party. The 8 sailors who went with him received Navy crosses, but they had to wait years for public recognition because the mission itself was secret. Today, U-505 sits in the Museum of Science and Industry, surrounded by interactive exhibits explaining Enigma encryption and Allied code breaking. Millions of people have walked through it. School children run their hands along the periscope. Tourists peer into the cramped crew quarters. But few truly understand what this particular submarine meant. Stand inside U-505 today, and you are standing in a tomb that became a treasure. 59 men crewed this boat on its final patrol. They surrendered thinking they had failed. They lived as ghosts while the war raged on. And they never knew they had accidentally handed the Allies one of the most valuable intelligence coups in history. The hidden safe is long gone. The Enigma machine sits in a climate-controlled vault. But the impact of what was found that day in June of 1944 echoes through history. The story of U-505's safe teaches us something uncomfortable about victory. Sometimes winning requires sacrifice we would rather not acknowledge. Sometimes the difference between triumph and defeat is hidden in a metal box nobody knew existed. Sometimes the heroes never know they are heroes. Today, when you visit the Museum of Science and Industry, there is a small plaque marking where the safe was located. Most people walk right past it. They don't realize they're standing next to the spot where history pivoted. That's fitting. The most important things are often hidden. The real stories exist beneath the surface, and the truth is always more complex than the version they tell you first.